welcome back to the Real State of Real Estate podcast. Welcome back, Kayla.
Thanks, Tenny. Happy to be back.
Good to have you. Well, today we are talking about break leases in WA because it is a hot topic at the moment. We seem to be having them come at us left, right and centre. So first question, what is a break lease?
A break lease is a fixed-term tenancy agreement that ends early due to circumstance changes.
Yep, and everyone's circumstances are completely different. So it could be due to tenants moving into new builds, buying homes, moving back in with family to save on costs. The list is kind of endless. There's no one answer.
No.
And there's no one situation that fits all. So we're going to do a bit of an overall how to handle a break lease and what the tenants need to be aware of and what the owners need to be aware of, and we'll kind of break it down a little bit. So the first thing, you've nailed it. So it's a fixed term tenancy ending early due to circumstances, and for a tenant, they need to be aware that leaving early is classified as what we call a breach of contract because it's a breach of the agreement. It doesn't mean you're in trouble, it's just a breach of the agreement. So it could incur costs.
Yeah, Tenny, that's right. And for landlords, there's a few really important key bits of information. So in the current market, it may be unreasonable for them to deny a break lease request because the form does say a request.
But the advice that we've been given from Demers and Rewa is that right now, just because of how busy it is and how easy it is to potentially find a tenant, it's just not something you can really say no to at the moment that we're
Definitely in the current market.
Yeah.
And for landlords, there's a few really important key bits of information. So on the form that you would receive from your property manager, it does say a tenant request to break lease. So the advice we've received from Rewa and Demers is that whilst it might be a request, it's not reasonable to deny a break lease in this current market just because it is hot and there are good tenants out there and it's not impossible to relet your property in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the key word that we keep using in a break lease for both parties, but it mainly is for the tenants, is we as the agents and the landlords have to be seen to be mitigating the tenants' losses. So just making sure that we're doing everything we can to ensure that we can find another tenant in a reasonable amount of time.
Yes.
So to do this, we would need to be setting a fair rental price. That's probably the first one. So as long as you've got market evidence to support the price that you're advertising at, that's fine. So it might be higher than what your tenant's currently paying, but that's okay as long as the market suggests it. You just wouldn't want to be advertising it at $100 more than what you could potentially be getting for it, because it's not reasonable.
Absolutely.
And then what about advertising? How quickly do you need to do that?
So pretty much as soon as possible. As soon as the break lease is approved, we need to be acting as soon as possible, setting up home opens with the tenant and getting prospective tenants through. And then we start the application process once that home opens occurred and we start, going through all the applications to see who will be the best fit for your property and present them to you.
Yeah,
for you to make your decision.
Yeah, and we found that just with when we are going through a break lease, you need to remember as a landlord to make sure that you're not unnecessarily rejecting applications, because almost treat it as though your tenant isn't breaking lease, you're just advertising your property for rent and it's vacant. Treat it, not to say that you have to accept anybody, that's not the case at all, but be reasonable with your expectations and just make sure you're getting a good tenant that can pay the rent.
Definitely, and that's the most important outcome for you as well.
Yeah, for sure.
And then the next important key part of it is for landlords to be aware that they are still paying for a new tenant.
Yeah.
So
it's not free.
No. And that's, I think, a misconception with break leases and costs. Sometimes it can be taken as the vacating or break lease tenant is paying for the new tenant, which they're not. They're just reimbursing you for what you haven't used in the cost that you already paid for that tenancy.
Yeah, so the reimbursement of their tenancy. And it seems like that's a bit unfair, but unfortunately, like we said, there's different circumstances. The tenants aren't doing it on purpose. It's just changes in their life have meant that they have to break lease early. But you could end up getting a tenant for longer. You might have someone that moves in that wants a 2-year lease or whatever it might be, that's looking for like a long-term rental, which is ideal. So what do I do as a tenant if I need to break the lease? So what's the first step?
Please reach out to your property manager.
Tell us straight away.
Yeah, absolutely. And before you make any decisions, like the most common one at the moment is tenants purchasing properties. but us only being advised after the fact, and then there being a bit of a shock when there's actually costs associated with the break lease. So just touching base with your property manager so you can have a clear idea of what's involved with the cost process, so that we can give that to you up front and you know exactly what to expect.
So once you tell us that your intention is to break lease, we'll send you a break lease request form, which will have all the costs outlined in that, which is generally rent up until the new tenant moves into the property that we've found, advertising, and the unexpired portion of the leasing fee. So those are generally the three things that you'll be charged, and then you'll also be required to maintain the property up until the new tenant moves in. We just like to make everyone aware that we still have to do a final bond inspection and make sure that the property has been left in the same condition you received it, minus fair wear and tear. So at Davey particularly, we set a week gap between when you vacate and when the new tenant moves in. So you will be responsible to pay rent that week, but it just allows us the opportunity to go out and get everything finalised for your tenancy, and hopefully then there's no delays. It just gives us enough time to do that.
Yeah, definitely. And it allows for a very smooth and seamless process with the new tenant as well.
Absolutely.
So whether you're a tenant or a landlord, we are here to help. We want to help and ensure it's a seamless process for both parties. So just reach out to your property manager if you're a landlord or a tenant, and we're always here to guide you.
Yeah, absolutely. And we always want the best outcome for both parties. It's never an easy situation. You know, there's always going to be some kind of cost involved, but we're there to support you and we're there to guide you through it, as you said, Kayla. And there's also just a great bulletin on Demer's website that we'll link in the show notes, I suppose. I think that's what it's called. But yeah, we'll link that in there that you can have a read through. It's very clear and concise. But as always, you can reach out to Davey Real Estate for any help.
Thank you.
Thanks.